and what you had to pay for it, and you figure your expenses and everything, and the chances that you take legally.
Big seizures used to be measured in hundreds of pounds. It is not unusual now to catch a ship with 30 or 40 tons of marijuana.
For the same amount of money that you would make on 40,000 pounds, you could bring 1,000 pounds of cocaine and make the same amount, if not more.
When they were sending like all this pot, they would send a few kilos of coke.
As for marijuana, the police might be able to stop it. But as for cocaine, the police have no real answers.
In the beginning, it was very small.
Because it was so expensive.
And they would bring them in a suitcase.
In the last year, cocaine seizures have doubled. More than a quarter of all cocaine seizures in the United States were at Miami International Airport. While we were filming a routine day, agents got another one. 5 pounds of pure cocaine were hidden in the bag. U.S. Customs said the seizure was worth more than $1 million.
When I first came down here, I really had no idea what I was going to do, and I worked with a guy training dogs, agitating the dogs and letting the dogs hit a sleeve and bite me. And doing that, I met a Cuban man out in Hialeah who became very notorious, very famous down here. And his name was Albert San Pedro. He was in the drug business. It was obvious. I got him a really bad dog. His name was Sarge. He was a German Shepherd. This dog was crazy. I mean, absolutely nuts. And his stash was under the doghouse on the side of the house. He would lift the doghouse up, and he had a cement pad, and in the cement pad he had a safe, and this dog would sleep on this stash day and night, and this was his way of stashing it. Eventually, he was my main supplier. He would front me $1/4 pound, and he would give me like 3 or 4 days, and then I would go and bring him the money back.
Shortly after midnight, Hialeah businessman Alberto San Pedro was arrested again at his palatial home. So far, he stands accused of conspiracy to commit murder, drug dealing, and corruption. San Pedro brags he controls the majority of the Dade County Commission, its mayor, and no less than 15 judges.
No mention was made by any of the council members or Mayor Raul Martinez of the San Pedro affair.
There is no organized crime group that's going to challenge the Cubans.
In Miami, the Colombian drug organizations stepped into that market.
Worried Colombian authorities say they are now seeing increased coca planting as Colombian traffickers try to take over all phases of cocaine production.
It was very clear to us that the Colombians were already getting involved in the distribution area here in the States.
The Colombians realized that they were giving up a large portion of the profit to people they really didn't have to give it up from.
They didn't need the Cuban as the middleman.
And they just bypassed the Cubans completely.
That toehold is what sprouted into the crazy 1980s here in Miami.
These people didn't have a pilot or plane. Asked if we'd be interested, and I'm trying to be really, really, really careful. You have to be careful of who you meet, who you talk to. You might be the police officer on undercover, because that's starting to roll at that time. We set up an appointment to meet these people, and what I did was I bought the most expensive portable tape recorder I could find, and I went to a bunch of different locations. What I found was the best place of all was a bowling alley. I mean, the noise, the people, the clanging. The reason I'm doing this is if I'm meeting somebody and they're trying to record our conversation, I want to make sure there wasn't going to be much recorded. When we got to the place, I had 3 of my friends outside. We all have radios. There was no cell phones at that time. There were, but they were like this big. When we came out from after the meeting, I told them that we'd have to make a decision. We'd get back to them. And I had my friends follow the people home just to make sure that they didn't go back to the DEA building, the FBI building, the U.S. Customs, or whatever. And then we sat on them for 3 days to make sure that they were who they said they were. These people turned out to be Rafa and the Max. They threw a number at us that was more than agreeable. $3,000 a piece, or a kilo in your terms, and they wanted to move at least 400, a gross of 1.2 million. I just transported it. I took it from them, gave it back to them. Give me money, I'll go again. I wasn't worried about them because I had no intentions of ever stealing from them. I have no intentions of ever cheating them. All I wanted to do was make money, and money we made.
Sonny and Rico in the same bar. How lucky can a girl get?
Laura.
My name is Tony Mooney. I was born in Miami, Florida. After I graduated high school, I met somebody named Shelton Archer, and he was a photographer. He came up to me and told me I should be a model. He had a limey accent. He said he would like to photograph me at the airport. He had a plane. I ended up going with him to his plane at Lantana Airport, and he shot photographs of me. Most models have to struggle, and I must say, because of Shelton, I had a fabulous, very beautiful apartment. He went out and bought me a Mini Cooper. I had a maid, everything. Cash is a whole lot better than plastic, and Shelton always seemed to have plenty of it, and if he didn't, he went and got more. He was a photographer. I mean, he seemed like it to me. Of course, it was a little strange. He was living in Colombia. Then he told me he had a job for me in Santo Domingo. I didn't realize I was going to know him so well, but we had a plane crash. The first leg of the trip, he woke me up and told me he wasn't sure if we were going to make it. We ended up crash landing the plane. We were there like 7 days. We didn't have any water. We were licking condensation off the plane, and it was quite a mess. Finally, the Coast Guard came and rescued us. The Bahamians apparently had been looking for us, but once they found out Shelton's MO, the Piper plane and all that, they just didn't go pick him up because he had been convicted of drug smuggling there. When they finally picked us up, they believed my story that I was just really catching a ride, and they let me go and they detained him. I flew to Miami, and I was working on a shoot with a girl, and she told me that she had somebody for me to meet.
A friend of mine fixed me up with her. He was a lawyer. He was dating this really beautiful girl who was a model for Ford. And he said, you know, she's got a beautiful friend, and she lives in West Palm, but she works in New York, and I'd like to introduce you to her. And that's how I met her.
Her and her boyfriend kept telling me, don't do this, and don't drink in front of John, and don't, you know, and I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute here. I don't even want to go. Well, and then we opened the door, and there's this guy with this face, you know, he's looked so mean, and actually found out he wasn't. He was a wonderful person. I remember sleeping on the couch, and John bringing out blankets and covering me up. The next morning I woke up, I was on the couch, told me he'd like to take me to see his race horses. And I loved horses, I grew up with horses. So I said, okay. When I was growing up, it was just myself, my brother, and my mother. And John really put our family together in our eyes, and we really adored him. I mean, there wasn't anything he could do wrong. It's like a dream, you know, you could have anything you wanted. John made everything all right. He was a pretty magnanimous person back then. Everything was hunky-dory at home, and everybody was happy, and but then things changed when he met Shelton.
I was selling at that time. The Cubans didn't have big supplies, so I had to search out other people. This girl who I happened to have been seeing knew an English guy who was a pilot for these people from Medellin. So she introduced me to him, and he said, well, I'm going to hook you up. I can take you to these Colombians that I know, and this guy can give you whatever you want. And I'd heard stories like that many times, so I just said, sure, whenever you're ready, let me know. And we drove to Sunny Isles, Florida. And we go into this house. There was about 5 or 6 Colombians there, all like loaded to bear. When I say loaded, they were strapped. They had pistols, machine guns, and they were all standing around. And at that point, I realized this, you know, this guy's serious. This is for real. I meet this little guy. He can't be more than 5'4", 5'5", and he introduces himself, and he says, my name is Rafa. And he's telling me, you know, I'll give you whatever you want, man. And if you got some money, I'll front you twice the amount of money that you come with. And I said, well, you know, show me something. He takes me in his back room, he pushes a button, and a whole wall opens up like this, and I had never seen so much cocaine in my entire life, just sitting behind this wall. I said, okay, I guess you can't help me, man. I said, give me a day, and I'll put together the money, and, you know, I'll be back. The next day I came, he had an American guy there, and he introduced this American, and he said, this is my compadre. You know, I'm not in town a lot, but whatever it is you need, this is the man, he'll take care of you, and don't worry about it. He's 100%. And the man he introduced me to happened to be this man, Max Mermelstein.
John introduced me to Max. I thought they were going to open a shoe store together or some story like that.
Rafi came to trust Max because Max was married to a Colombian woman. She was the cousin of Pablo Escobar, the woman Max was married to. So they had a bond with Max.
Max seemed like a very nice guy back then. Seemed that way, anyway.
One Sunday, Max had a party out there, and I went out to his farm. The next thing I know, here comes this guy, and Max says, this is my transportation guy. You're going to work with him. He's got like 2 ATCs, these 3